Well, let's get into this. You know that feeling like you're stuck in these loops, maybe in relationships, maybe just how you react to stuff, feeling kind of trapped or hurt. And the biggest fights are the ones inside your own head, but you don't have the playbook.
Yeah, definitely. Searching for real change.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes that's the hardest quest, isn't it? Finding that lasting change within ourselves.
It really is.
So today we're doing a deep dive into some material that tackles exactly that. We're pulling out key ideas from excerpts of Richard Grannon's book, A Cult of One.
Right. And it's not your typical self-help read.
No, definitely not. Grannon really digs into his own experiences, psychological stuff like trauma and codependency, but also brings in things like martial arts, even some really intense personal moments.
Yeah, stuff that sounds almost mystical in a way.
Right. So our goal here in this deep dive is to, get past just the summary. We want to pull out those really important bits, those aha moments, the things that can give you listening maybe a shortcut, a way to understand these really complex dynamics better.
And see how maybe past stuff is shaping things now.
Exactly. And find some actual concrete ways to maybe build a stronger sense of self.
Yeah.
Find the path, not just see the problem.
Definitely. And what's really interesting is how Grannon frames where all this struggle comes from.
Yeah.
He really argues that a lot of it goes back to trauma, specifically complex trauma.
Okay, complex trauma.
Yeah.
So not just like one bad event.
Right. It's the inescapable stuff, the repeated difficulties, often from childhood. He argues that this kind of experience actually damages the boundaries of the ego.
Dissolving ego boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds a bit abstract. What does that actually mean for someone day to day?
Well, he uses this really striking analogy like impetigo sores on your skin.
Okay.
When your skin's boundary is broken, it can't heal properly, it's open. He says trauma can do something similar psychologically to your emotional boundaries.
So it gets hard to tell where you stop and someone else starts.
Exactly that. Your internal world, your thoughts, your feelings, they get kind of tangled up with theirs.
So that's why you might feel responsible for how someone else is feeling.
Yes. That's a classic example he gives. Someone's angry and boom, you instantly feel like it's your fault.
Even when it logically couldn't be.
Right. Because that boundary is just so porous, their feeling sort of lands inside you. And he also connects this boundary blurring to something he calls emotional incest.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a strong term. What does he mean by that?
Yeah, and he's very clear. It's not sexual. It's about a kind of covert pressure where a child is sort of manipulated or forced into being the emotional support system for an adult.
Like propping them up emotionally.
Yeah, or even being like their emotional whipping post. It's a massive violation of the child's space,
Absolutely.
And it just further cements that difficulty in forming healthy boundaries, having a solid sense of who you are. It really messes with development.
And this lack of boundaries, this is key to codependency then, in his model.
Totally central. He uses the image of two circles overlapping.
Yep.
A healthy person is their own circle, right? Boundaries intact. But in codependency, the circles overlap, and in that shared space, things like boundaries, your own sense of self, your agency, they get weak, right? They bleed into each other.
Exactly. And he introduces this concept of the echo person within this. Echo. Like the myth, the nymph who could only repeat.
Precisely like her. The echo is that smaller codependent circle. They don't really direct themselves. They feel, and he uses these words, gutted and stuffed with the other person's identity and needs, especially after ongoing abuse.
Wow, gutted and stuffed. That's vivid.
Isn't it? So instead of having their own light, they just reflect the other person, the big circle. He says codependency isn't just behaviors, it's a whole way of not being in the world.
A way of not being, like a chameleon constantly shifting.
Kind of, yeah. Always focused outward, trying to manage other people's feelings or problems to get some kind of temporary validation, because there's no solid core inside.
Man, that sounds exhausting. It just painful.
Huh.
How do people even survive environments that create that?
Well, he talks about those primitive trauma responses, the ones Pete Walker also identified. The 4 Fs.
Right, fight, fawn.
Fight, fawn, flight, and freeze. Yeah. They're like deep survival programs that kick in when you're in toxic situations you can't easily escape.
Okay, so break those down. How do they show up?
Okay, so fight is pretty straightforward. You get combative, aggressive, ready to confront the threat.
Okay.
Fawn is the people-pleasing one. You negotiate, you compromise. You basically sacrifice your own needs to try and appease the other person, just to keep things calm, to survive.
The path of least resistance, maybe?
Sometimes. Flight is the urge to escape. Run away, avoid conflict, avoid responsibility. This can look like workaholism or hobbies or, addictions, even just zoning out, dissociating. Exactly. And then freeze is, well, getting stuck, feeling numb, dissociating in a different way, maybe through overeating or drugs or just endless TV. Just shutting down.
And these become automatic reactions over time.
Yeah, totally ingrained. Your go-to coping mechanisms when things get stressful.
Okay, this leads us to a part of the book that might ruffle some feathers, right? His take on the narcissist codependent thing.
Yes, it's definitely a more provocative perspective. He puts forward this idea that narcissism itself could be seen as an expression of C-PTSD.
Wow, okay.
And maybe even more controversially, that narcissists are also codependent in a way.
How so? Codependent on what?
On others, basically, for narcissistic supply, for attention, for that sense of self they lack internally. He makes a distinction, though. He calls it predatory codependency.
Predatory codependency.
Versus prey codependency.
Yeah.
So the predatory type, the narcissist, bullies or manipulates others to get that attention. The prey type, the more classic codependent, sacrifices themselves, seeks significance through martyrdom, through being needed.
So he's really pushing against that simple good guy, bad guy narrative.
Yep.
The pure victim, the pure villain.
Absolutely. He challenges that black and white thinking hard. He points out that both types, predatory and prey, feel things like jealousy, resentment, guilt, shame.
Okay.
The difference is how they handle it. The predatory type shoves down guilt and shame, projects it out, becomes aggressive, needs to dominate. The prey type suppresses the jealousy and resentment, but is often drowning in guilt and shame, looking for purpose through submission.
He even says the prey type fights to feel guilty sometimes.
Yeah, isn't that something? Because guilt feels more familiar, maybe even gives a weird sense of control compared to that terrifying emptiness of not having a real self.
Wow, okay. And he talks about the shared fantasy, too. That sounds like
Yeah.
something good relationships should have.
Exactly. A shared fantasy is like common goals, a vision for the future, a story you build together that's vital for healthy connection. He uses this neat analogy of two spacecraft building a bridge between them. But in the dynamic with a narcissist, he argues that bridge, that shared fantasy, is built mostly as a lure. It's designed by the narcissist to serve their needs, to pull the other person into their world, their distorted view.
So it's hijacked.
Totally hijacked. And part of healing for him is letting that bridge just crumble, not trying to fix it, just letting it go.
He doesn't just theorize, right? He shares some incredibly raw personal stories.
Oh yeah, the anecdotes are intense. He describes one relationship like a Balrog Gandalf death struggle, from Lord of the Rings. Just this locked-in, endless conflict.
No.
He talks about constantly being caught in conversational traps, facing aggressive questioning, living with this low-level hum of ambient emotional abuse.
Ambient, like it's just always there in the background.
Yeah, that feeling of fear or irritation just simmering, and the utter exhaustion of constantly walking on eggshells.
Try not to set them off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some of the examples he gives. The rage over tiny things. They really stick with you.
Yeah, I remember reading about that, like hot dog mustard.
Yes. Or the flavor of Fanta. Or someone's star sign. Triggering these massive, hysterical fits of rage.
It sounds unreal.
It does, but those specific, almost absurd details, they show the sheer volatility and, frankly, the lack of reason you can face with someone who might be severely disordered. It shows how draining and crazy-making that environment is.
And it wasn't just mental, right? He talks about the physical impact.
Oh, hugely. Severe anxiety, depression, terrible insomnia, nightmares.
Yeah.
Waking up from nightmares about violence, he says. Plus significant weight gain, constantly getting sick. It really drives home that this isn't just in your head. It batters your whole system.
Absolutely. He also tells a story about a relationship with someone called Wu, where like the history and the physical connection kept pulling him back.
Right. Even though there were problematic behaviors happening, he mentions things like eye-fucking and flirting that got way worse with alcohol.
And the key point was his failure to set a boundary.
Exactly. He pinpoints that moment, not setting a clear boundary then and there, as leading directly to losing his own self-respect. It really highlights that core struggle.
How hard it is to draw that line, especially with history involved.
And the internal price you pay when you don't. That loss of self-respect, that's a heavy cost.
Stepping back a bit, Grannon also kind of looks at the bigger picture, right? Suggesting maybe things in our culture are making relationships harder these days.
He does. He observes this shift, maybe subtle, maybe not, where dating can feel more like a game, winners and losers.
Like partners or opponents.
Almost, yeah. Adversaries to be beaten or managed rather than partners.
And he links this to consumerism somehow.
He floats this idea, yeah, that maybe consumer capitalism has sort of rotted our minds a bit when it comes to relationships.
How so?
That we start seeing love, sex, even people as commodities, things to be consumed.
Like browsing options online.
Kind of. Adopting that consumer mindset where people are options or services that should meet our specs.
And if they don't...
Then you get that sort of infantile frustration, he suggests, like demanding to see the manager because the product of the relationship isn't working perfectly right out of the box.
Okay, I can see that. So his point is, maybe Mahdi culture isn't exactly setting us up for success in healthy relationships.
That's a big part of it. He argues we often lack real training for the messy reality of adult connection. And he also points out that we tend to ignore the psychological risks of casual intimacy.
Risks? Like what?
Well, intimacy itself, he says, naturally triggers shadow activation.
Shadow activation.
Yeah, it brings up all the unresolved stuff, the trauma, the ugly bits from your past in both people.
Okay.
Now, that can be a good thing, a chance to heal and connect deeper. But if you don't have the tools and maybe the culture is pushing selfishness, it can just become really destructive.
Right. So given all this deep trauma, the codependency, the tough dynamics, maybe these cultural headwinds, finding a way out sounds daunting. Where does someone even begin?
He's very clear. It is incredibly hard, especially if you've spent a lifetime in that fawn mode, the people-pleasing mode.
Because you don't even know what you want.
Exactly. If you don't have a strong sense of self, how can you be honest? How do you even know who you are deep down?
So building that sense of self has to be central.
Or at least building the capacity for it. And right at the heart of that is learning to build better boundaries. But he makes a really crucial point about what a boundary actually is.
Okay, it's not just saying, don't cross this line.
No. He says that's just observing someone approaching the line. A real boundary needs a consequence.
Okay.
And a consequence demands action. Words are just a promise of action. They aren't the boundary itself.
And taking that action that often feels like a sacrifice, you said.
Yes, because it forces you out of your comfort zone. If you're used to appeasing or avoiding conflict, enforcing a consequence feels scary, unnatural. It goes against the grain of those old survival patterns.
So where does the strength come from then to actually do it?
This is one of the most powerful insights, I think. He argues that real strong boundaries don't primarily come from being taught them, like in a workshop.
No.
No, they arise more spontaneously when you genuinely start to value something or someone.
Okay.
And the most fundamental thing you need to start valuing is yourself, your time, your energy, your principles, your peace.
So valuing yourself more leads to better boundaries.
Naturally, he argues, when your self-worth increases internally, being assertive, protecting your space, it becomes less of a struggle and more of a natural expression of that value. It comes from the inside out.
That makes a lot of sense. And he also connects being vulnerable to abuse with having a weak moral philosophy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point he makes. If you haven't really grappled with those big questions like, what do we believe is good? What's bad? How should I live? Then you lack a strong internal compass.
So you don't know where to draw the line.
Yeah. Exactly. It makes it much harder to recognize when behavior is genuinely harmful, unacceptable, and to find the conviction to say, no, enough. Developing your own moral code, even just the process of wrestling with it, builds that inner strength needed for hard boundaries.
Okay. The book also gets practical, right? It outlines tools, disciplines, almost like deprogramming.
He does use that word, deprogramming. He compares recovering from these dynamics, especially narcissistic abuse, to breaking free from cult-like brainwashing. And yeah, he outlines key steps.
Step one.
Recognizing and breaking the illusion of the bait.
The bait.
Yeah, that initial powerful lure the narcissist used to hook you into their shared fantasy. You have to face the painful truth that you are never going to get what that bait promised. It was never real.
Oof. That sounds tough, accepting that loss.
It is. And the next step is accepting the difficult feelings that come when you try to pull away.
Like guilt and shame?
Exactly. He calls it accepting the hook of guilt and shame. Because when you start to withdraw or set boundaries, you will likely feel awful, selfish, ungrateful, maybe even convinced you're the bad guy, the narcissist.
Right.
And he stresses how vital it is to see those feelings as just part of the process, part of breaking that trauma bond. They don't mean you're actually wrong or bad.
That's crucial. And the third step?
dismantling that shared fantasy itself. Recognizing that the narrative you were living in wasn't truly yours, wasn't based in reality, and just letting it dissolve. He does warn about acting too quickly here, though.
Why is that?
Because you're still kind of carrying bits of their narrative inside you. It takes time and careful work to fully disentangle.
Which is why he strongly recommends professional help.
Absolutely. Repeatedly. Don't go it alone. Find a therapist, a counselor, someone who understands these specific narcissistic dynamics. That's key.
Why is the therapist so important?
They provide that essential neutral space. Somewhere safe to explore things, and crucially, someone who can help you reality test when your own perceptions have been warped by gaslighting and manipulation.
Makes sense. And beyond therapy, he suggests personal practices too, like honest self-perception.
Yes, this is a specific discipline. Regularly, maybe write it down. On one side, list your honest intentions, your values in a situation or interaction. On the other side, write how you suspect other people might actually see you or perceive those intentions, especially people who reacted negatively.
Ooh, that takes courage.
It really does, but doing it consistently builds incredible self-awareness and humility, too. It helps you see your blind spots, how you might be coming across unintentionally.
Okay. And there's another one about changing mental focus, like actively shifting your thoughts.
Yes, and he links this directly to things like kung fu training. It requires real discipline, real practice.
So not just positive thinking.
No, it's more active.
Yeah.
Multiple times a day, consciously shift your focus away from dwelling on past hurts or negative loops.
Towards what?
Towards visualizing what you do want, desired experiences, using positive self-talk, spoken kindly to yourself, and critically, incorporating physical movement.
Physical movement. Why is that part so important?
Because we're not just minds, right? We're body minds. To really shift your internal state, you need to involve the body. He suggests making it an unusual movement, something that breaks your normal physical habits.
As a pattern interrupt.
Exactly. That combination, visualization, positive inner dialogue, and this kind of pattern interrupting movement, it's a powerful way to retrain your brain and body away from those negative grooves.
Interesting. Emotional literacy is another tool he mentions, getting specific about feelings.
Right. Moving beyond just I'm mad or I'm sad, using tools like maybe an emotion wheel to find the precise words.
Like instead of mad, maybe indignant or disappointed or feeling unseen.
Precisely. He gives that example, realizing pissed off might actually be covering up feeling hurt, ignored, sad, indignant.
And how does getting that specific actually help?
Well, first, it helps you understand your own reactions better. They feel less random. Second, it can help you connect current feelings back to past experiences, past trauma. Like, I feel dismissed just like when my dad used to. That brings insight.
Right.
And maybe most importantly, it revolutionizes communication. Instead of you made me angry, which is blaming,
Right.
you can say, when that happened, I felt unseen and disappointed. That gives the other person actual information about your inner state, which allows for a totally different kind of conversation.
That makes a huge difference. You also mentioned therapy being framed as a space to expand the self.
Yes, because codependency, remember, is often about squashing or even annihilating the self to serve others. So therapy becomes this crucial space to deliberately build that self back up.
And that's not selfish.
No, he calls it healthy narcissism, which sounds like a contradiction, but he means valuing yourself, your needs, your well-being, which is essential, but without harming others in the process. It's self-care, self-respect.
Got it. There's also that really important point about responsibility, isn't there?
Yes, so crucial. The abuse, the trauma, it wasn't your fault. You didn't cause it, especially as a kid, but
Right.
the hard truth is that you are the only one who can take responsibility for protecting yourself now. And part of that is looking without judgment at why it's been so hard to value yourself enough to set those necessary boundaries in the past.
That's a deep question to explore.
It really is. He even brings this down to seemingly small things like small talk.
Small talk, really.
Yeah, he pushes back against people who think they're too good for it. He argues it's fundamental.
How so?
It's about seeing other people, acknowledging them. I see you. You exist. You're human like me. It's basic connection, basic kindness. The content isn't the point. The act of engaging is.
So practicing seeing others might help you see yourself, too.
Maybe indirectly, yeah. It's practicing connection and basic respect, which are foundations.
Okay, finally, there's that really striking story from Malaysia with Pak Din, the bow and arrow.
Right. The bow and arrow, the talk about fighting demons in dreams, the vittles he had. It's a very intense part of the narrative.
And he presents it as a major turning point.
Definitely. Whether you take it literally fighting actual demons or as a powerful metaphor for his internal struggle,
Yeah.
it gave him something crucial: intense discipline and a compelling sense of purpose. This feeling like he had to fight the demons of the apocalypse.
It's quite a mission statement.
Hmm?
How did that help his healing?
Well, he suggests that having this big, meaningful framework, literal or metaphorical, doesn't matter. It empowered him. His struggle wasn't just pathetic personal brokenness anymore.
It was a battle.
Exactly. A significant fight against these powerful forces, these ingrained patterns. And that narrative, that sense of purpose, it gave him the motivation for the relentless, consistent action and discipline that he says was the single most important thing in actually changing his life. It gave him a reason to do the incredibly hard work every day.
Wow. So wrapping this up, thinking about everything we've touched on, maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on is this.
Yeah.
Could it be that the ultimate fight isn't really against other people, the external villains? But maybe it's the ongoing daily discipline required just to accept reality, warts and all, to wrestle with the uncomfortable truths about ourselves, our past.
And to keep choosing action, keep choosing self-worth.
Exactly. In a world that constantly seems to pull us towards denial or just numbing out or blaming everyone else, maybe that's the real battle.
That's a powerful question to sit with. What really stood out to you listening to this deep dive? How might some of these ideas about trauma, codependency, boundaries, discipline resonate with your own journey? Definitely something worth reflecting on.